In this video, I'd like to give a demo of the cloth maker simulator that's included in Chapter 10 of Extending Art of Illusion. Um, you'll have to have the plugin installed for it to work. Once you have that, one of the things you'll notice is it adds this fan object over here on the left to the tools, and then it also adds um, three menu items onto the object menu. There's some other things it adds that aren't quite as obvious, but um, for it to work, we need to have some kind of an object to work with. We'll use a spline mesh here because it looks more like a cloth than what some of the other objects do. We could use any of the others, but um, having a flat sheet tends to make it better. Um, I'll go ahead and move that up a little bit just to give it a little bit more space. So for this to be a cloth, we'll have to convert that to a cloth. We have the object selected, so now we can convert it to a cloth. Brings up a dialog box here asking for max error and max distance. The defaults here should be fine. You can play with them, get different results, but basically the max distance is going to give you, if you have a smaller number, then the vertexes will be closer together. If you have a larger number, then they'll be further apart. So once we click that, we can look over here on the right hand side and see that we've changed our spline mesh. Here we see it's changed the name of it, um, indicating that it is a cloth. And then if we go back over to the object menu, we'll see that we can now select generate cloth simulation or the duplicate cloth as triangle mesh. There's not much point in doing that just yet, but so we'll select this first item here. The convert to cloth, of course, is grayed out because it is a cloth already. So this brings up another window where we can edit our cloth simulation. Of course, we have the vertexes of the cloth shown on the screen. We can select these and lock some of them in place if we like. And I'll go ahead and select the two of the corners, and then I'll select mesh and lock in place. And so now we see that they've changed colors from black to blue. The two blue vertexes will stay where they are. If we selected some that we don't want, we could select them and then set as dynamic to turn it back to black. Over here on the right, we have some of the settings for the simulation. We've got frames per second, which some of these you probably won't mess with a whole lot. Drape frames is the number of frames that are calculated before the actual simulation. Any of the drape frames it will have an impact on the cloth, but they won't be saved, so it won't take up as much memory if you don't need the frames before the simulation starts, or a particular part of the simulation that you want. Sim frames is the number of frames that will take place. Since it's 30 frames per second, then 30 frames is just 1 second, so we probably want it to run a little bit longer than that. So let's say we want it at 5 seconds, so we'll put it at 150. Subframes is the number of frames that are calculated between the sim frames. these are also dropped out of the simulation, but they have an impact. I mean, it's steps within the simulation, but they aren't actually displayed. Then collision distance is a distance from an object that it'll collide at. Since we don't have another object in the scene, that won't matter. Gravity is the force of gravity on each vertex. This will be in the y direction because we have y selected up here. Spring constant is the stiffness of the cloth, and then damping constant is a factor that controls uh, how much impact the velocity of the vertexes have on the simulation. And then vertex mass specifies the weight of it. Um, we'll go ahead and click on floor collision detection. The floor for the cloth simulator is defined as 0 on the y-axis. So if the vertex reaches the point where it would go below 0, then it will just stop. So now we'll click OK, let it go off and calculate the simulation. Up here on the top left hand corner, you can see the frames being spit out, telling us how many have, have we've gone through, and how many more we have to go. So now we go back to the original screen. It looks the same as before, but if we click the play button, we should see some kind of result. And you'll notice here that it does stop when it gets to 0 point. It drapes down to the floor here. But we may want to put some kind of wind in it, so this is where the fan comes into play. Um, it's just an object. We click on the screen to put it in the scene, just like any other object. Um, we can move it around in the screen. We probably want it behind the cloth, and then of course we can rotate it if we like, point it in a somewhat different direction. To set the magnitude, we can double click on it to get to the edit menu for it. Um, I'll go ahead and change that from 25 or 0.25 to 0.025. Wind fall off tells us how far from the fan the wind has an effect. And now to see or to have that take effect, we need to recalculate the simulation. We can do that by either going back to the menu item we had before, which won't be available with the fan select. But we can go back to here, or we can double click on the cloth object. Brings us back to this screen. All the settings should be the same as before. And if we just want to recalculate, we can hit OK. So now I'll go off, and it'll take some time to go through this. It takes a little bit longer with the fan in place because it has to calculate additional forces on each vertex. And of course, the change in the simulation could have an impact as far as which vertexes are colliding with each other and things like that. And given the length of time it's taken to do this, I'll probably kept some of this out for the video. So through the magic of editing, we've reached close to the end of the calculation of the simulation. Um, this window should disappear here shortly. And now if we go back to the beginning and press play, we can see that um, there is somewhat of a change here from the fan blowing on the object. Of course, we can render the scene and show what it looks like. You can get you can mess with the lighting some and get better results from what you're seeing there. But sometimes also if it has a texture on it, it tends to look better. Another thing that you can do with something like this is now that we have a cloth, we can actually duplicate this cloth as a triangle mesh. So now we created this tri mesh over here that is in the same place. It's the same shape as the cloth. But now if we go backwards, get over here where there's actually something going on. Um, you'll notice that we have our cloth that's still still has that simulation component to it, but the triangle mesh is sitting there. It's the same shape as whatever state it was in when we copied it. Um, and the reason we have this is because you may not want to keep the full simulation. You may just want the shape that's formed by the cloth and use that in somewhere. You may want to export it to an object or something like that. So you rather than carry around all those frames, the object can be moved around the scene and just like any object. Of course, you can also edit that as a triangle mesh, and you can see what it looks like now, rather than being that flat surface that it had before. So hopefully that helps you understand how to use the cloth simulator that's described in Chapter 10 of Extending Art of Illusion.